is true that last week, the New York Post editors reached out to three parties, one being George Gascon, Megan Pete's team, and Kelsey Harris. It is also true that Megan's team was the only ones that responded back for that request for comment. I had some glaring questions, and that was the reason for this op-ed. Things didn't make any sense to me, many issues in this case, and I was shocked by the lack of interest from the media to ask very simple questions. There were multiple people with gunshot residue on their hands that night. Why didn't all individuals have the residue tested, their DNA tested on the weapon? That's a legitimate question. According to the prosecution, Tory was excluded from the clip of the gun, and according to Tory's defense team, they said DNA analysis showed that there was a 0.01% chance that Tory touched the actual gun itself. Another piece that stood out to me, the call that the prosecution alleged Tory made confessing to a crime. I listened to that call. I'm sure many of you have as well. I didn't hear a confession. But what really shocked me about it is if my best friend was shot maliciously by someone just 2 or 3 hours before, I wouldn't have answered the call, or if I did, I wouldn't calmly have a conversation with the individual of it. And certainly, I would ask, why did you shoot my friend? And more importantly, I would never have given you my current location out of fear of you finishing the job. That was something that stood out to me. I also, in my op-ed, discussed Kelsey Harris pleading the Fifth Amendment. She wasn't accused of anything by Megan Pete or the police, and to my knowledge, she wasn't under any investigation. So why plead the Fifth? What also shocked me is the prosecution gave her immunity. For what? What did she do? Is there an allegation of her doing something? I'm not aware of that. Maybe some of you can answer that question today. During the time of trial, George Gascon, just to take you back to where we were at that particular point, he had just barely won a recall attempt. He lost support in many key demographics of voters. Crime was up in Los Angeles County. And this case would have been a silver bullet for him potentially winning. His policies obviously were bad and people were harmed. So that didn't happen, and thank God it didn't happen. At the heart of this injustice is the misuse of gun enhancement charges, a sensitive tool intended for the most dangerous and violent offenders. In Tory Lanez case, these enhancements were not supported by evidence. But George Gascon, interestingly enough, who is someone who regularly would drop enhancements or not recommend them, chose to provide enhancements to Tory. And in his case, in any given situation, according to legal analysts I've spoken with, he would do 1 or 3 years if he did it without the enhancement. That's interesting. Why did George Gascon choose to pursue these enhancements? You know, there's cases I've been looking through which George Gascon has pursued, many in which he utilized these enhancements. A couple come to mind that I would like to reference here. One, Raymond Danger Gonzalez, a Mexican mafia gang member involved in a premeditated murder. A couple come to mind that I would like to reference here. One, Raymond Danger Gonzalez, a Mexican mafia gang member involved in a premeditated murder of 2 young men in 2017. Despite the brutality of the crime, Gascon did recommend enhancements. You premeditated murdered a teenager and another individual. Brutal crime. Why would you recommend enhancements, but you would recommend them for Tory? That doesn't make a lot of sense. He also did pursue sentencing enhancements for the senseless murder of General Hospital actor Johnny Whipter in Los Angeles in 2024.
My name is Diana London. I'm the CEO of the Secret Weapon Agency, which is a crisis communication firm. And I'm also the CEO of a company called London Global Strategies. I am a member of the media as well. I'm a commentator on a few networks. and I also serve as an advisor for Giotto's Institute and also another company called Promising People that is fighting to reduce the recidivism rate in this country and also to correct our criminal justice laws. As a woman who has worked in Congress on criminal justice reform, I deeply believe in law and order. Let's go back to the night in question, just like Giotto was just talking about in the attorneys. As the attorneys laid out here today, the prosecution failed to produce a single shred of forensic evidence tying Tory to the actual gun. His fingerprints weren't on it. His DNA was later found to be 100% nearly excluded from the gun, as shown in the worksheet that was provided to the defense late on the eve of the actual trial, after making a request for that very document. After trial, looking at this evidence, there is a 0.01% chance Tory's DNA was on the firearm. That's a difficult statistic to equate with the story as told by the prosecution, which may be why this was not present in trial. In fact, there were 3 people that night at the scene who tested positive for gunshot residues. One of those was Kelsey Harris, as Giotto mentioned, the assistant to Megan Pete. According to multiple sworn testaments that you've heard today, including one from the bodyguard and driver with Harris on the 2 days of the trial, Harris admitted to firing the weapon during an emotional outburst. Harris admitted to firing the weapon during an emotional outburst. Tory intervened to de-escalate, not to harm. It is important to note, the police did not fingerprint anyone else who had gunshot residue on them that night, only Tory. Why? Even more troubling, the investigation itself was a disaster. Bullet fragments disappeared, the gun's serial number was sealed, a move that blocked the defense from investigating ownership. Police failed to follow standard procedures. Why? Didn't mark shell casings on the road, and didn't test others involved that night with DNA. This wasn't justice. It was a rush to judgment. Worse still, the prosecution knew the case was thin. So what did they do? They tacked on gun enhancements, just like they spoke about. The charges, these gun enhancements are meant for gang shootouts and armed robberies to inflate the charges and turn a flimsy accusation into a decade-long prison sentence. Enhancements are a powerful tool against violent offenders, but using them in a case with no forensic evidence, murky testimony, and the defendant with no criminal history, that's very important to point out. He had no criminal history. That's not justice. That's a political stunt.